We announced my pregnancy. My sister-in-law's plan to humiliate me at my husband's party backfired, landing her in jail and a divorce. For the last 7 years, I, 29F, have been wed to Harry. Except for his relationship to his sister, Kayla, who brings all the negative into our life, I enjoy everything about our marriage. Now don't get me wrong, when I initially met Kayla, I loved her. But with time, I rapidly changed my view. She is poisonous, manipulative, and really negative. Knowing the kind of person she is, I have worked hard over years to be on her good side. My husband dated Syl's best friend when he was 17 in the past, but they subsequently broke up since he felt under pressure to be with her because of Syl. His sister said he and another friend of hers should be together when he turned 23 and discovered he was single, but he disagreed. She went crying to their parents about how she wanted him to wed someone she felt comfortable with, but his parents hardly really listened to her throughout their great battle. While my husband and I were meeting and falling in love, his parents were quite encouraging, but Syl always treated me coldly. She would always bring up Harry's exes for no apparent reason whenever I was present, reminding him of how well they were doing and suggesting how he could get in touch with them. This continued for some time. Harry also thought this strange and would ask her to stop bringing up his exes. I was not the only one who saw this. Then Syl would get enraged and start mocking me, claiming I was jealous and Harry shouldn't be with someone like me. Syl would deliberately invite one of Harry's exes whenever his parents would call us for supper, saying she had inadvertently come across them that day and had to ask them politely. She doesn't follow me, but she checks my Instagram constantly as well. Since I have a public account, I observed she is usually the first person to see my stories. Should a man comment on my photograph, she would then go to her brother and grumble over how I was sharing indecent images of myself. Harry and I would actually chuckle at her claims. She persuaded Harry to split off with me when he and I agreed to live together, telling him I had many defects as a woman and that she could find someone far better than him. Since I had been just friendly to her all along, this comment really wounded me. Sadly, Sil's treatment of me got even more bad as soon as Harry and I were engaged. Everyone started applauding Harry and me as we revealed our engagement, but I observed Kayla was somewhat quiet. Then, startled everyone, she sprang up from her chair and left our gathering. Later, she called Harry, sobbing and yelling about how she didn't value receiving the news with everyone else as she felt she was the closest to him and deserved to be the first one to know of his engagement. Later on, she messaged me nearly borderline threateningly, advising me on how I should treat her brother as she had always been the only female in his life. I nearly shuddered over the strange message. I left her message on scene, which I know must have offended her even more, not even bothered responding. Every time Syl saw me, she started to progressively ignore me. She stayed involved in all the wedding preparations for whatever reason, like when I went dress shopping and had my bridal shower. Though both my future mother-in-law and fiancé called her out on it several times, her criticism of the wedding reached a whole new level as she freely expressed her unhappiness with my decisions. Her actions persisted. One day, Kayla overheard me talking about the centerpiece with my future mother-in-law. She started to make fun of me right away, stating how my decision had no class and how this was why she wanted her brother to wed someone better. For me, that was the tipping point and I lost control. I made it plain to her that she was no longer invited to our wedding and yelled at her that I could not stand her continual taunting and criticism anymore. Shocked and gasping in surprise as if she had never expected me to challenge her, Kayla was infuriated even by my mother-in-law, who backed me. Later on, Kayla contacted Harry, moaning about how I embarrassed her and insisting he should control me since I would be his wife. Harry insisted strongly that he supported my choice and that she would not be invited to the wedding should she not atone. She grudgingly texted me a sincere apology. I saw it and, once more, left on read. I was already tired from getting ready for my wedding, and I wanted nothing to do with her drama. She did visit our wedding in the end since I wanted her to not criticize us afterward. Everyone, including the guests, seemed to have no issue following the pink tones and pastels chosen for my wedding. But Syl arrived looking as though she were attending a funeral, a black floor-length gown with a veil. To put it mildly, we were stunned. Syl visited everyone sharing her grief at losing her brother to another woman. My husband approached Syl about her discomfort with her wedding attire at the reception. Saying that she had the right to wear whatever she chose and that I was too domineering, she said the victim. When her non-stop scene-making persisted, my mother-in-law and father-in-law ultimately ordered her to leave. It was embarrassing for me. Ever since that day I avoid her. I forbade Syl anywhere near our kid when I delivered my son Nate. She tried to oppose it but my husband's parents had my back. They supported my choice and knew exactly why I wanted Syl far from my infant. Syl suffered a miscarriage with her then boyfriend Jamie 2 years ago and it totally shattered her. For everyone, that was indeed a depressing period. Given our already childbearing status, Harry and I felt bad for her. We chose to be somewhat more lenient following her miscarriage. She could connect with our kid Nate, so we would welcome her to our house. Despite her behavior with me, she has been rather lovely to our son, really shocking. She looked to have changed at first, but with time she returned to her former self. She constantly talks about how difficult her life is, how things never seem to go for her, and blames ex-friends or managers for upsetting her life. I have found over time that she is never wrong in her thinking. She is always attempting to get people on her side by playing the victim card and hardly acknowledges any flaws in confrontations. She chose to get married this year and invited everyone to save us. Given our relationship seemed to have improved, Harry was surprised to learn we were not invited. She began to explain how she won't let me come since I would cause disturbance to her wedding when we questioned her about it. Having never done anything to her, I phoned and asked her why she would think something like that. Kayla began to tell how she had deliberately dressed in all black for our wedding, so now she was worried that I might do the same and this was why she wanted me off-site. I informed my spouse straightforwardly about how manipulative she was, outraged about it. After discussing with his parents, Harry decided to let Sil know they would neither be attending the wedding nor would they pay for it. This turned Sil to tears, and she began to blame me for starting this disaster. Her husband told her she had no right to be pointing fingers at me as she had freely admitted her own error. Kayla, however, explained her behavior by stating that I should just get over it since our wedding was long ago. Later, she contacted me to apologize and ask for forgiveness as FIL and MIL were still not paying for her wedding. Though I hate to say it, Kayla when she wants something. I wanted to just go forward from the past and forgave her. Her wedding to Jamie went perfectly. We all showed up and had fun. Not even 6 months later, Kayla appeared at our door grumbling about her marriage failing. For a few days, Harry and I let her stay with us where she would spend endless hours venting about her husband. They appeared to be struggling to conceive, and Kayla was obviously blaming Jamie for everything. When I went to speak to Kayla, she insisted it was entirely her husband's responsibility. She would be hyper-focused on our lives and try to create things that didn't exist when she was not grumbling about her husband. For instance, usually every morning before heading to work I visit the gym. When I'm running late, I occasionally grab my work clothes so I may finish my workout, have a bath, and change into my business wear. Sael observed this for some time and would have many questions about it, including why I was bathing or why I even needed to visit the gym. I didn't give it much thought and would tell her how I liked keeping my weight and how I disliked visiting the office all sweaty. She would nod and lick her lips. Mill was telling us about a friend of hers who was divorcing right at lunch. She left her friend's spouse and grabbed half of his assets after learning about his adultery with her. Sael stopped her abruptly to ask my husband whether he and I had signed a prenup before we were married. We paused to stare at her. We stopped eating. She glanced at my husband expectantly as if I hadn't even arrived. My husband told her straightforwardly that he is not someone who he and I both made rather good money and we felt no need for a prenup. Sael snorted and began to say that he could be blindsided any day and that cheats abound today. Her statements offended me, therefore I asked her to clarify exactly what she meant. Sael then began to remark how I was obviously meeting someone as I was usually carrying change of clothing everywhere and that, as Harry's sister, it was her obligation to warn her brother. These were shocking remarks for me. Phil and MIL arrived right away to save her from continuing to fabricate such things and advised she shouldn't interfere with others' affairs. Without missing a beat, Sil continued to emphasize how she was only trying to be there for her brother and began to joke if our son Nate was indeed Harry's son since he didn't quite look like him. I swear I watched the redness of wrath on my husband's face. In my life, I never had seen him this enraged. Looking Kayla squarely in the eye, he informed her that she was not a mother yet as she did not deserve to be one and that her child would be better off in paradise than with someone like her. Kayla's lips hung in stunned disbelief. Mil and Phael simply watched silently as my husband left Kayla complaining about her being a shameless person trying to ruin everything since her life had nothing to offer. She was merely a loser, he informed her, doing nothing all day while her husband worked nonstop. He kept saying that since she was plainly projecting, she should focus on her own marriage instead of pointing fingers at me and asking about prenups. Reduced to tears, Kayla began to wail. Expecting comfort, she turned to Jamie, seated just next to her, but he never spoke. My husband never has this kind of mental collapse. She eventually got up from her chair and dashed into the toilet. My husband was boiling over. I stroked his hand and Mill arrived to cool him down. Understanding just how annoying she could be, I nodded as he apologized for what his sister had said about our son. Having taken enough from Kayla over the years, I was somewhat relieved that my husband stood up for me so publicly. He apologized to Jamie but totally ignored Kayla once he cooled off. That day following